Okay, today I wanted to talk about the priesthood power, power of the priesthood, and energy work. Specifically, Reiki energy work is the work that I use the most, but it's not the only energy modality that I use. I just want to acknowledge that I have set this container. This is my Reiki room that I'm coming from today. I just thank the fire for holding some space. I've already smudged. So we are all healers. I believe that with all my heart. And nobody outside of you can heal you. People go to faith healers all the time. Mormons go get priesthood blessings. Healing is an inside job. All healing comes from within. So outside people can help us. I like how Jeff Foster put it. I'm going to read a quote from him. He said, "A true healer does not heal you. She simply reflects back to you your innate capacity to heal. She is a reflector, a loving transparency. A true teacher does not teach you. She does not see you as inherently separate from her or less than her. She simply reflects back your own inner knowing and reminds you of the vastness of your being. She is a mirror, a signpost, and love is the space in which all of this is possible. Love heals, and we learn best in a loving field." So that is how I view energy work. When I do energy work, it is a loving field that I am tapping into, being a clear channel for that energy to flow through and into whoever I'm directing that energy towards. So the energy that I practice is Reiki energy. This book is called Reiki for Spiritual Healing. And I found this book in October of 2013. It was the very first experience I had. And these are all self-attunements. So you don't have to. In fact, I got this at the library. I didn't even purchase a copy. I just borrowed a copy and did all the self-attunements before I ever went to a Reiki class. But the minute I opened the book, I could feel the energy coming off the pages. And I knew that Reiki was calling me. And so after I did this self-attunement, I went to some Reiki workshops. I learned Usui Reiki. Usui is a man from Japan, and he is the one that brought us this modality, this healing modality. And that was like over 100 years ago. The next person that took this energy and kind of developed it more is William Rand. And he runs the International Reiki Association. And so I've gotten he's part of my lineage. Usui Reiki was my first lineage, and then William Rand through Holy Fire, World Peace Reiki was my second. And so I have trained under William Rand for about 10 years through different teachers that teach him and from him personally. I've taken some of his classes. So that is where I guess you would say my authority comes from to use this energy. Authority is very important to Mormons. They want to know how is it you have the ability you have. They view priesthood power, their priestcraft, as coming straight from God. And so in their eyes, priesthood power is the best of the best. Like they are the tippy top of the priesthood. Energy work, train. I've got something in my eye. Okay. So priesthood power, it's passed down from one priesthood holder to another. And so men in the church believe they have this unbroken chain all the way back to Joseph Smith, who got it from Peter, James, and John, and John the Baptist. And priesthood keys like from Moses and Elijah. Like Joseph Smith claims that he got these personal experiences with these dead prophets, and that the chain has been unbroken since then. That's what Mormons believe. So if you're a male Mormon and you get the priesthood authority, you get it from somebody who got it from somebody who got it from somebody, all the way back to the beginning of the church. They believe that this chain is it's unbroken, and so everything falls on the shoulders of Joseph Smith. If Joseph Smith was a fraud, the church completely crumbles. So if he didn't get the keys from Moses, then, or Elijah, and Peter, James, and John didn't come, and or John the Baptist, if these experiences were not real, then it's all just a made-up story that people are giving their entire lives to, changing everything for. So yeah, it's super important. Authority is important. Where did you get this ability to use the priesthood? The other thing they say about priesthood power to women is that because all power is God's power, women can tap into priesthood power. The problem is women don't have any keys. Men only can hold the keys to the priesthood, to the power. And therefore, women can only exercise God's power so far. And then you have to call a man in. So blessing a sick child, say, does a woman have the power to bless her sick child and call down? She can pray on it. She could even get some oil and go through the motions of what the men do. But true Mormons are going to look at that as not a very valid experience or a valid blessing, that it needs to be done by a male figure. Even though women in the very beginning of the church did exercise priesthood power and bless people to heal the sick, the church has gotten really far away from that. So Alvin Boyd Kuhn, I love his work. He wrote an essay on prayer and healing. He is an author that I would highly recommend. He's got so many good works. He said this about healing and what we're talking about. It goes along. He said, what must be seen is that healing, if it comes truly as is not sheer mesmerism, must come in ways that are holy, in accord with natural law. I think that is the key to all healing. Nature must be made healing's ally and not be put in the position of an enemy to be overcome. Man must heal himself through the Godhood that is in him. Man must heal himself. A spiritual healing involves simply the development of sufficient intelligence to cease violating beneficent law and disciplining oneself to obey it. When he says obey, he's talking about obeying natural laws, not man-made laws. It means learning how to live properly. So healing is an inside job. People who give blessings or do energy work, like myself, it is just a tool to help the person asking for the blessing or asking for the healing to align themselves, to help clear themselves, to do the job of healing themselves. So we can do all things in our power to help another person, but ultimately it is always up to that person to bring about the healing or to bring about what it is that they need. So Reiki medicine. Reiki is just one of the tools I have in my medicine basket. I also do, I worked with Alberto Vialdo. in his light body school. So I have his method of energy medicine. That's what he calls his energy work, is energy medicine. I also have worked with Rose Cole through, it's called the Sacred Oaks Academy now. But she has a modality called guided energy medicine. Sorry, I have this eyelash that just wants to poke my eyeball. And so I've attuned to that medicine. And then, of course, the Holy Fire Reiki medicine. There are so many modalities out there. And really what you're learning to do, I like to think of it as like a radio. You have all these frequencies of the radio, and you just tune in to what station you want to hear. Energy work is like that. When you become a channel for, say, Holy Fire, you're using that frequency of energy to do the work when you call on it. And priesthood power, see, Mormons think priesthood power is the be-all, end-all of energy work, or of course they would never use those words, but power to heal and to help. But the truth is, it is just like one setting on the dial. And if they have to, what they would need to get their minds around is that all the frequencies of energy would be God's power. Mormons kind of have a problem with that. It's their priesthood power and then Satan's power. They have kind of made that divide of, if you're doing energy work, there's very many Mormons, especially the older ones, that think you might be doing something of the devil, because there's God's power and Satan's power, and they look a lot alike, just like in the temple. When you see the temple movie, God's power and Satan's power are shown. Satan is wearing robes of his holy priesthood. And guess what? Mormons wear robes of the holy priesthood too. So basically, there's God's power and then there's Satan's copycat power. And a lot of Mormons, especially here in Utah, believe that if you're dabbling in any kind of energy work or doing anything other than the church, the priesthood power, then it's probably satanic. And there have been people get excommunicated here in Salt Lake, Happy Valley area, because they were using a form of energy work and calling it like Christ consciousness or Christ energy, and the church didn't like that, and they were doing healings and all kinds of other stuff. So to me, it's just, it's ridiculous. But the church, it's power and control and fear, and so they quickly, if they wanted to stay members of the church, they had to shut it down and quit using their modality of energy work. So there's a lot of fear and confusion around what's the line. It's very blurry. What is still God's power that women can use, but doesn't cross the line into satanic power or witchy power? That is kind of the situation I was facing in 2014 when my mother, she was diagnosed with cancer. I have down here exactly what kind of cancer she had, and I wanted to remind myself. I wanted to share my experience with her. Okay, so she was diagnosed with small cell cancer in her liver and colon on January 17th of 2014. So she had many priesthood blessings. My parents lived in a neighborhood where their bishop was just down the street and their stake president actually lived right next door. So for people who don't know, the bishop and the stake president are, the male leaders in a ward, which is a small area, and a stake, which is like 7 wards combined. So the stake president is a level above the bishop. And these men both hold priesthood keys to do what they have to do in their callings, to watch over the ward and watch over there's the stake, which is like several wards, right? So the stake president lived right next to my parents. And so my mother had many blessings, especially when she was first diagnosed, because the diagnosis with small cell cancer is death within a year. Like it's not a good prognosis. And she did not want to do cancer treatments. She felt very strongly that she was 84. She had other health issues, and she was just very much at peace with the idea that this was the end of her life. Her mother had passed at 84, and mom, she gets this diagnosis and she's just made her peace with it. Well, my father didn't like that. The bishop didn't like that. The stake president didn't like that. All of them, life is so precious, right? You're supposed to fight for life, and you're supposed to do everything you can to prolong your life and be on this earth. And so they're all giving her blessings, and they're telling her basically, okay, you think you've prayed and got this answer, but you should pray again, because it's not the answer we're getting. We get that you're supposed to do these treatments. And so you better pray again, because my mom was pretty headstrong that she was not going to do any cancer treatments. She was just going to allow her body to go through the process and pass eventually, naturally. So my mother had a lot of priesthood blessings between January and March. So this experience that I wanted to share happened on March 31st in 2014 at 5:30 p.m. My sister and I had been away to Denver at it was called an I Can Do It conference with Hay House. So we'd been listening to spiritual teachers, and we had just had such a beautiful trip together. And my parents' house was our meeting place, because she's in Idaho and I was further south in Utah. So we met at our parents' house, went on the trip, and on the 31st, we came back to spend one night at my parents' house and then go back to our own houses. And as soon as we walked in the door, after this long 12-hour car ride, I looked at my mother and I could just see she was in so much pain. And my mother was not on hospice yet. She really wasn't getting anything for the pain of the cancer. And I looked at my mother and I was like, you look terrible. She's like, yeah, over-the-counter meds are not helping me. And my dad was holding her hand when we walked in, and we pulled up a chair. Mariah and I, my sister, pulled up a chair with her, and my mother knew that I did energy work, but she didn't understand it. And at this time, I had been working for hospice for people who were crossing over, and I'd been doing that for about 9 months and had amazing experiences with people who were very close to death. And I had shared that with my mother. So she knew that I'd had some experience. And how we give Reiki is very similar to blessings, priesthood blessings. We lay our hands on, and that's what the priesthood calls it, by the laying on of hands, and put their hands on your physical body. Mostly they're always on your crown chakra, your head. But so anyways, I asked my mother, I'm like, can me and Mariah, because she does it as well, I'm like, can we give you some Reiki just to help you feel a little bit better? I didn't know what was going to happen. And my mother said, I will take whatever you have. She's like, she's like, I'm in so much pain. And that just said a lot, because for my mother, who's this true believing Mormon, to say yes to having Reiki, this is the first time she's had any kind of other energy work other than a priesthood blessing. For her to say yes, that was huge. And so my sister and I, we pulled up right in front of her. So we're like, our knees are touching. I have her right hand in both of mine, and my sister has her left hand in both of hers. And, Reiki energy work, it's different for everyone, what you feel or what you don't feel. And so I just said, I don't know what's going to happen, but it can't hurt you. That I know for sure. We're not going to be doing anything that would hurt you. And so we sat in silence for about 15 minutes. And I truly believe this experience happened because of genuine love that we had as mother and daughter, and my sister as mother and daughter. All three of us with my mother had a very hard relationship. We were not close to my mother. And especially since I left the church, and Mariah had left the church like decades earlier. And so she had a very different relationship with mother, but it was also a very hard, tumultuous relationship, as was mine. I mean, so it's not like we had this amazing connection before we started doing the energy work. But both of us in our hearts really wanted to express our love to mother and wanted to help her with her pain. And in that moment, after 15 minutes of feeling this energy just pulse through me, I asked my mother, I'm like, can you feel what I feel? Because my hands were just buzzing and they were so hot. The vibration was so, it was just amazing. And then my mother said, yes, I can feel that. And she said, what is it you're doing? Like she was a little weary, but the pain had left her body. She was no longer in pain, and she could feel this buzzing, this electricity between her hands, and it was vibrating. And by that point, when we started talking about it, like I could feel the energy surging all the way through my body. And she asked, what it is you're doing. And I just said, we're a channel for the energy and love. I felt like it was very important for her to understand it wasn't some witchy woo-woo, even though that's what it looked like, that we were doing to her, that it was a very loving energy. It was the life force energy that we were tapping into and flowing to her, and that she was accepting. And it was just this beautiful, peaceful, blissful moment that both my sister and I mean, it was a little miracle because, we're both her heathen daughters that have left the church and have no intention of coming back. And so she's having to make peace with the fact that we are doing something for her that has taken her pain away, and that she can physically feel in her body receiving something from us. And then we're already in this most beautiful moment. And then because I've had this connection with my grandma, and I shared this in the video before, I had seen my grandma and I had channeled a letter from my grandmother. We're in this swirling kind of vortex of energy. And then my grandmother comes behind my mother. My grandma's dead. It's her mother, and she is standing behind my mom with her hands on my mom's shoulders. And because I felt such a connection to my mother in that moment, I asked her, I said, Grandma's here. Grandma is standing right behind you, and she's got her hands on you. Can you feel her? And my mother was like, I feel her. I know she's here. And she started crying. She started having quiet tears well up in her face. And to me, that acknowledgement that her two wicked daughters were actually doing something very beautiful and loving, and that Grandma had come into this presence with us. So now we're three women surrounding my mom, sending her as much love and energy and pain relief that we can channel. It was just an incredible healing, very healing moment for the three of us. My mom had 5 weeks left in her life from that moment. So after there'd been about a half an hour at that point, and I could tell that my mom, the best thing for her from that point, she needed to go lay down. And so we wrapped up the little energy session. And in fact, I want to share a picture, because this my dad took a picture of us right after we finished our healing with my mom. So that's me with the dark hair, my mother in the middle, and my sister Mariah next to her. And look at the smile on my mom's face. She's 5 weeks before she dies in that picture. She was so happy. And so she went and laid down. Eventually we got dinner, and then as she was getting ready for bed that night, she wanted another Reiki treatment to fall asleep. And Mariah and I were like, yes, of course, we'd be happy to do that again for you. And so my mother and father had gotten into bed, and mom was just laying on her back, and her knees gave her a lot of pain, and her shoulders. Before she ever got cancer, her knees and her shoulders had pretty much completely wore out. It was bone on bone, and she had bone spurs in her shoulders, and so they were aching. And so I asked my mom if it was okay if I concentrated energy on her knees, and my sister Mariah was working on her shoulders. And mom was just like, do whatever. I'm just going to be here. She's like, you do whatever. But at this point, it was so beautiful how much had changed in just those few hours, since we had gotten there. And so we do our stuff. We prepare our hands, open our palm chakras, and then we lay our hands on my mom's body. And my mother, she just totally relaxed. And the last few words that she spoke, none of us could really understand, because it almost sounded like she was drunk. She was just slurring her words and drifting off into sleep. And my father's staring at us like this. He's sitting up on the bed looking at me and my sister. And, Mariah and I, we close our eyes a lot of the time, and to be a channel, so you're not distracted. And I'm channeling energy to my mother's legs, and she's got her shoulders. And just out of the blue, my father goes, it should be me doing that for her, not you. There was no gratitude from my father that we had helped my mother find peace and be pain-free for those moments. His Mormon priesthood mind was like, 2 daughters here, servant of Satan, touching mom. It can't be good. Whatever it is they're doing can't be good. Even though the results clearly were good. By your fruits you shall know them. My mom felt pain relief. My mom felt better. And my dad, that was a big cognitive dissonance moment. How could his 2 daughters, witchy daughters, servants of Satan, bring relief? Well, in his mind, what we were doing was using Satan's power, because we didn't have access to priesthood power, God's power. We didn't have access to God's power. And in his mind, well, Satan's power can mimic God's power. So that must be what's happening. They're just mimicking. They're giving false light. I have true light. I mean, it was just not a good experience with our father anytime that we tried to either help mom or him. And that's another story, because before he died, he did let us do some energy work with him. That's a story for another day. But so to see mother's relief in pain with our Reiki treatments compared to his priesthood blessings did not offer her that moment of relief. And I honestly believe it was because of where she was at in the moment. We came in at one of her lowest most hardest moments and helped her. I think when my dad had given her blessings before, she wasn't at rock bottom. And her willingness was, I will take whatever you have to give. In that moment, she was so open and receptive and in so much pain. It was very easy for her to accept our love and the energy work that we were doing. So the power of the priesthood has so many conditions around it, right? You have to be a man. You have to have had the proper authority to get that priesthood, to exercise it. Not everyone has access to that priesthood power frequency, going back to the radio analogy, right? Not everyone can tune into that priesthood power and access that only male members can practice. I was going to quote, so maybe I'm going to go back. And then, same with Reiki. Not everyone can use Reiki. You have to be attuned to Reiki. But everyone can tune into vital life force energy. That is what you are made of. That is Creator's power, and it runs through everybody. Everybody has healing in their hands. Everybody has hand chakras, energy centers throughout their body. And if you see, most mothers, if a child comes to them and they're injured, they fell down, they hurt their knee, or they bumped their head, what do mothers do? They put their hands on them. Where does it hurt? We put our hands, it's because it's a natural healing modality. You're using your vital life force energy that is all around us to make your child feel better. That is an energy everybody can attune to. And then you can take it to the next level, and you can find a different modality like Reiki or guided energy medicine, or, just energy medicine that I do with Vialto. So that was an incredible experience with my mother. And then every time so the very next day after Mariah and I did that for her, she got on hospice and decided enough was enough. She was going to get morphine. She was going to be comfortable towards the end. So she went against her priesthood leaders who had told her get cancer treatments, which would have totally fucked up her brain. I believe that wholeheartedly. For my 84-year-old mother, cancer treatments was not the best route to go. And that is what her priesthood leaders were telling her to do. And thank God my mother was strong, at least that much strong in herself and her will to say, that is not the route I'm going. And I do like to think that maybe Mariah and I had a little hand in helping her make that decision, that she was able to stand up to those priesthood leaders and her husband, because my dad too was like, you should go get this, poison, go get radiation and chemo and fuck yourself up really good, because I might get a few more months with you. So selfish. That's how I view what he was asking my mother to do. She wanted nothing to do with that. And my father got cancer, and that's how he died. And he did the cancer treatments, totally fucked his brain. And after the first treatment, he could no longer live by himself. So he went from a very active person. The minute he got those drugs within his system, his brain started to fry, and he could not live alone. And he was going to be same kind of cancer diagnosis, although different. But his prognosis was also, you'll be dead within less than a year, no matter what you do, treatment or no treatment. He chose treatment, fried his brain. My mother chose to go out on her terms, and I'm surprised she didn't get on hospice sooner. But she waited until she had that experience with us. And I kind of also believe that was on purpose. That was divine timing, because if she had already been on hospice, Mariah and I that we probably would not have gotten to have that experience with my mother. I think she had to be at rock bottom to accept that her two daughters who had left the church did have something beautiful to offer, and might not be totally under Satan's power. And I don't think we would have had that experience that we had with her and my grandmother coming into that sacred circle if she had been on morphine at that point. I think that was the defining moment for her to say, yeah, I want to be comfortable. Let's just get on hospice and say goodbyes. And that's what she did. Goodbyes are not forever, are not the end. It simply means I'll miss you until we meet again. Talking about my mother is a little hard. Okay, so I do want to talk about her passing, because it was a really beautiful experience. I had been with my grandmother when she passed, and that was like, in 85, and here we are in 2014, so almost 3 decades later. I'm with my mother, and it's clear that it's her, close to her time. And we had a little family reunion, and we said our goodbyes to each other because we did not think she was going to be, this was the end of April. I was coming back in a week, but I wasn't sure my mom would make it a week. So we decided to say our goodbyes that night after my sister had come down, Mariah, and some of her family, for them to say goodbye to mom, because they definitely wouldn't see her again. And so we'd had such a beautiful day together, and I'm trying to say goodbye to my mom, and my little 2-year-old at the time took a marker. We're having this special, beautiful moment, me and my mom, and crying, and my 2-year-old found a permanent marker, and he went and drew on everything in the next room. Like, he painted a mural on the wall with the permanent marker. And it was one of those moments. Do I even tell my mom? Because she's about ready to pass this world. And does she really need to know that my son did this to her wall? We did laugh about it afterwards. And every time I came up, I tried to find something new to take the marker off the wall, but it stayed there until they sold the house. But after my father died, we got most of it scrubbed off and then repainted to sell the house. But so a week later, we are coming up for my daughter-in-law's graduation, and my mother was still alive. So May 3rd, we come up. It's my daughter-in-law's graduation from USU, from college, and my niece was also graduating. So my brother and his wife came. We had a lot of people at my parents' house, and it was overwhelming. When I came to talk to my mom, we'd said our goodbyes, but my mom was still here, and that's what she said to me. So disappointed and so sad. She's like, I'm still here. Like, I haven't been able to cross over yet. And I'm like, well, I'm glad you're still here, Mom. And we went and did our graduation stuff. And then when I came back after a big long day of celebrating with everybody, my husband and I both kind of had this feeling like this weekend was going to be it. Wasn't. So he took the kids and went home to Salt Lake, and I stayed. Now my son and daughter-in-law, who had just graduated, were living with my parents in the basement. So there was my son, my daughter-in-law, my mom and dad, and myself at the house. And I didn't know it at the time, but I would end up being there for another 4 days while she passed. And I gave her Reiki that night to help her sleep. And we prayed together. Her wish was that her mother would come and take her home. And that was our intention when we did the Reiki, when we did energy work that night on my mother. My mother's intention was for Grandma to come and help her cross. Well, it was in the middle of the night. My dad yelled down for me and my son to come up from the basement. And my mother had an episode in the night, and it was clear that she was making her way out, transitioning. So we called hospice, and they brought a hospital bed into the family room for my mother to transfer from her bed to the hospital bed. And then she never got out of it again. It took her 4 days to cross. And she was in and out of this world and the next. And it really was such a beautiful experience to be with her and sit with her while she's coming and going. I remember her coming to once, and her eyes were just wide and big. And she goes, "Can you see all the people in the room? Can you see them?" And I'm like, "Nope." I'm like, "It's just me and you, Mom. There's nobody else." And she was like, her eyes were just wide big, and then she's gone again. She's back in her other world, I guess, talking to the other people. And I did Reiki with her every time it was my turn to sit with her. So we kind of rotated between, there was me and 2 other sisters and my dad, basically, and my son. But my son and daughter-in-law also had work and lives, so they really didn't sit vigil with my mother. But we always had somebody sitting with her those last 4 days. And so I'm doing Reiki on my mom, and sometimes I had my arms lightly resting on her, and sometimes I had my arms above her because I didn't want to disturb her. But this was one of those moments where I came over and just lightly put my hands like on her head and was just giving her some Reiki. And she looked like she'd been out of it. I didn't expect her to respond or to say anything to me. And she goes, "I know that's my Mindy." She just goes, "You have such sweet hands." And that just touched me, like, because that's not something she would have said normally in her normal waking, non-cancerous self. She wouldn't have called my hands sweet, or even me to say that's my sweet Mindy. That just really touched me. And so another time I came over to her and gave her medicine. We were still giving her the morphine on a pretty regular schedule, but she was no longer eating or drinking, and she, didn't request food. She was barely in and out of consciousness, but we would give her the medicine in a little syringe, and then I would also give her a little syringe of water because it does taste really nasty. That I knew. And so I thought she would just enjoy a little sip of water because she was still swallowing. And she stopped me after I gave her the water, and she said, "You take such good care of me." She said, "I don't deserve such good care. Where did you learn to be so thoughtful?" And that kind of blew my mind, because I'm thinking, okay, you didn't think I was thoughtful before? I don't know. It just kind of startled me. First, it startled me that she was talking, and that she said that. And I said, "Of course you do, Mom. You do deserve good care." And I said, You taught me. Being a mother is the most selfless, thoughtless, or thoughtfulness, not thinking for yourself, caring for somebody else. It comes naturally when you're a mom. And I thanked her for being my mom, even though we weren't always close and we weren't always agreeing with one another. I was expressing my gratitude for having her in my life. So that's how it went for 4 days, 4 long days. And Randy had been home taking care of the kids, and then he had to leave. So I had to go back home, and it's a 2-hour drive home, 2-hour drive back to my mom's. So I was going to be gone for 4, probably 6 hours. And I was like, okay, Mom, it's okay if you pass, but I would really like to be here. And so I told her I was leaving. But just in case she wasn't going to be there when I got back, I wanted to say goodbye to her again. And at this point, this is Sunday. I think I've been there since Thursday. She hadn't said anything for so long. I didn't know if she'd even hear me, but they say the hearing is the last to go. And so I'm crying and holding my mom's hand, and I said, I'm so sorry, but I have to go home to my children now and take care of them for a minute because Randy's leaving. And as soon as I said I have to go, my mom scared the shit out of me. Her eyes popped wide open and she sat up and she's like, you have to go? It's like, oh my God, Mom. You nearly gave me a heart attack. Like, yes, I have to go home now, Mom. I'm so sorry. And then she just laid back down on the pillow and was out of it. And she never spoke another word again. That was it. But I was like, wow, it was just amazing. And so instead of just crying, there was a little bit of laughter. And I went home, took care of my family, picked up my mother-in-law so that she could watch my kids while my husband went on his trip. And then I turned around and went dashing right back. And I was sitting with her, and it was about 1:00 in the morning, and her breath changed. It started that death rattle, and we knew it wouldn't be very long. That was one of the longest nights of my life, sitting up with my mother while she was truly transitioning. She never spoke again. After I left her side and her eyes popped open, that was it. She was on the other side and never really truly came back. It was just her body breathing. And so I'd been with her all night. It was 7 a.m. and I'm like, okay, tapping out. Let one of my sisters take her. And I went downstairs to go shower, and literally she passed in that moment. I think for whatever reason, I wasn't supposed to be immediately at her side. And she crossed over. And that was just an incredible experience with my mom, one that I will never forget, and I am so, so grateful for. So the point of sharing that, I'll come back to just a sec. Got interrupted by my son. I had to take his phone call. So priesthood power versus my hippie magic. That's what we ended up calling it with my mom after I laid my hands on her with my sister. It was our hippie magic. I think it all comes down to belief, what your beliefs are. And whether we heal or not, whether we use a modality like an energy work modality, ask for a priesthood blessing, it all comes down to belief. And the person who's receiving the energy work, what do they believe? Because I know priesthood power, are beautiful experiences of people giving blessings and having a healing. I don't doubt any of that. I think the problem that comes is when Mormons say we're the only ones that have it, or we have God's true power and nobody else does. I'm putting it in a God camp versus Satan camp. Like if you're not Mormon and you're doing energy work, then it's under this label of Satan or satanic. And I think that's wrong. You know what I would love to see? I would love to see a circle of women holding their infant baby and blessing it, giving a blessing that way. But I think the church is too afraid to allow women to ever hold a key. It all comes down to those damn keys that they claim that they have. And the problem, the keys to the kingdom are not priesthood keys. The keys to the kingdom are natural laws. That's the way I see it. Natural laws are what hold the keys to the kingdom, not men. And natural laws can be used by both men and women. So, yeah, that's a big, big difference between my way of thinking and most Mormons. Because priesthood keys are a real thing that only men can touch. Women are not allowed to hold the keys. Therefore, they're only allowed to use a tiny bit of that priesthood power. And if Mormon women do these other modalities like Reiki healing, you are playing with your membership because they could take it away from you. They could threaten you with excommunication if you lay hands for the purpose of blessing or healing, helping. You're walking a blurry, fine line that can get you in trouble if you care what the Mormon church thinks. If you don't care, then, it's not an issue. But if you are Mormon and you're trying to make the faith work, but you're also interested in accessing your own power, accessing the vital life force energy that flows through everyone, it's your right to exercise your hand chakras. It's your right as a mother to bless your child. Nobody should tell you differently. Not the church. So, it really is the women that are going to bring changes to this archaic religion. And this is one of the ways they can do it. The priesthood power, they won't let you use it. Find Reiki. Reiki is such a simple way to play with energy. Go to the library. I found this in a library in Utah. Reiki for spiritual healing. It's all about self-attunement. There are so many good Reiki books out there that you can do self-attunement for. So you don't have to give off a big chunk of change to go to a workshop. Pick up a book and experiment for yourself. I know they will tell you you're dabbling with Satan's power if you do that. Call their bullshit. Call their bullshit and see for yourself. By their fruits you shall know them. Through my energy work experience, I've had incredible experiences, and I wouldn't call any of them demonic. They were all very much angelic and beautiful. I've had it with almost every single one of my children, giving Reiki, doing energy work, doing alignments, doing illuminations, attunements. These are all words that I use with the different tools that I've been had the authority to use. Why not have both? Priesthood power. If you're a Mormon, you've got your man. He can do the priesthood stuff. But there is so much that women can do too. Just need to be brave. And it's going to take women standing up, like my mom, standing up to the priesthood authorities and saying no, or yes, like to her daughters. Yes to us. Yes, I'll take whatever you have to offer me. And she did that. She was brave. She let us do our hippie magic on her, our Reiki woo-woo, and she got relief. Because at that moment in time, she absolutely believed with all her heart that we were offering her something worthwhile and something good. But it can go the other way, like it did with my dad. When we actually gave him his Reiki treatment, he believed he was being had with 2 witches. So belief is everything. It all comes down to belief. And so, yeah, if you are Mormon and you're curious, a Mormon woman and you're curious, priesthood power will only get you so far, because then there's gonna be a block at some point. Go around it, experiment. I loved Reiki. Reiki was the perfect first modality for me, and it might be for you too. So get curious and see where it leads. The Mormon Church does not have all the eggs in their basket. Okay? There are modalities out there that are from Creator. I'm not saying that there isn't any satanic or bad witchy stuff going on out there. Sure. You have to use your discernment. But like I said, by their fruits you shall know them. And I think it's one place where women can take their power back is through energy work and doing blessings in their home. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Namaste.